Hi, hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your wisdom.
It's so wonderful to see you and other old friends, some of whom I haven't seen faces of for a decade. It's delightful to be here again. Um, I guess by way of qualification, I have to say I had to check this because I don't keep daily track of it. I've been clean and sober now 31 years, 8 months, and 6 days. I put that into a spreadsheet to see what it would amount to, and it comes to 11,572 days, but who's counting? Um, so I don't know if that's a qualification for us giving this talk, but uh, I guess it's a start. I'm going to tell you the secret of how to stay clean and sober by referring to an old joke. You're going to groan when you hear this. It's a Carnegie Hall joke. A man is visiting Manhattan in New York and is lost. And he says to a local, he says, can you tell me how to get to Carnegie Hall? And the local turns to him and say, yes, practice, practice, practice. Okay, well, so can you tell me how to get long-term recovery? Yes, don't drink. Okay, so the simple answer to getting long-term recovery is on every one of these days, whether it's 1 or 11,000 or more, don't drink or use. And so that's the end of the workshop. That's all I have to say. No, just kidding. Um, for quite a while, I used as a password the abbreviation DDOUNMW. I don't use it anymore, so but I maintain the spirit of it. DDOUNMW means don't drink or use no matter what. All right, and it's the no matter what part is the key of that. And what it's meant for me is that in response to events as they come at me, I have to remember to keep sobriety uppermost in what I'm doing. So at that time, I was working as a lawyer, for example, and once I lost or didn't do very well in a lawsuit, and in the past, that would have set me off on a bender, but this time I said, no, I'm not going to drink or use, no matter how badly the lawsuit went. And another time, I settled the lawsuit on very advantageous terms. The client was very happy. They took me and my wife out to a wonderful dinner, and they were just glowing and happy. And there too was an opportunity to drink, but uh, no matter what, don't drink or use. A particular case, a particular instance was when my mother died. I was in what, 6 or 8 years clean or sober. I forget no, it was, no, 5 years clean and sober. It was emotionally a very wrenching moment. I had powerful feelings of different kinds. But again, I had to remind myself drinking or using is not going to improve this situation. It's not going to get me through grief any better. In fact, it's going to make it worse. And so I stayed clean and sober, and I'm very glad I did. Um, in making decisions going forward, the thing that's helped me is to use what we've been calling the sobriety priority. And that's just another way of saying that no matter what, just don't drink or use. It means that when you come to any kind of a decision, you evaluate the decision based on whether the branches of the decision are going to help you stay sober or not stay sober. You ever taken a close look at a, a broccoli or a cauliflower? You know, broccoli or a cauliflower seem to be these just a big trunk with branches, you know, big chunk of central stem with branches. And then you cut one of those branches off, and what have you got? You got a smaller version of the same thing. It's a stem with branches. You cut one of those branches off, you still got a smaller version, a stem with branches, and you keep cutting and cutting and cutting until you get down to the tiniest little remnant that you can hold in your fingers, and you still got the same thing. You got a stem with branches. Well, that kind of structure is called fractal. And they're great two-dimensional versions of it, you know, mandalas and other artworks. You can look them up. But the best, I think, is the three-dimensional version of it. Well, sobriety is a little bit like that. There's the big question, don't drink or use, long-term recovery. But then when you break it down into the little pieces, every little decision that I make in life has these two branches that one road is going to take me toward a stronger sobriety, and the other road's going to take me away from sobriety and, you know, lead me in the opposite direction. No matter how small the decision may be, sometimes it's what side of the street do you walk on, particularly early in recovery. That can be very key. Do I walk on the sober side of the street, or do I walk on the side of the street that leads me next to a bar or to a place where I met my connection in the past? And does that enhance the risk of my running into that person or running into that place or not? Tiny decision, but could be very vital in the outcome. We were asked early on some years ago, when we were working, doing LifeRing meetings at, gee, I forget the name of the place. It's a treatment center in downtown, near downtown Oakland, where people were saying, well, I get the general idea of what you're doing, but you guys have a workbook? I feel like I got a smear on my face here. Better. But you guys have a workbook? And of course, we didn't have a workbook. And so we decided we needed to write a workbook. So I sat down and started to write one and took in lots and lots of input from different people. And at the very beginning of that workbook, you'll see a T-chart. That is a decision-making tool based on what I was just talking about, that every decision you run into in life has a side of it that leads toward stronger sobriety and another side that leads toward weaker sobriety and stronger addiction. It's not quite what Yogi Berra was talking about when he said, if you come to a fork in the road, pick it up. It's more when you come to a fork in the road, do a sobriety analysis. Figure out which side is going to help you and which side is going to lead you in the wrong direction. In the workbook, those decisions, that huge wealth of decisions that confronts us in everyday life, is broken up for the sake of convenience and for the sake of organization into 9 domains. I don't know how many people here have had a look at this workbook. I don't know if a show of hands might be nice. See, I can't see the show of hands. I'm sorry, I can only see. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. Um, the workbook divides these areas into 9 domains. Your body, your exposure, your activities, the people in your life, your lifestyle, your history, your culture, your treatment and groups that you associate with. Uh, these are, there's nothing magic about these. These are just for purposes of organization and clarity so that you can get to work on these many small fractal decisions in a in an organized sequential way. But you don't even have to do those 9 in any organized way. You can jump around them as you like. This isn't another version of the steps. This isn't an escalator. It's not a ladder. Um, although there is a general upward trend in it, it's not designed to take you step by step, lead you by the hand as if you were a little child. Nuh-uh. This is choices for everybody to make and to explore their own lives and to explore themselves, to get clarity about the struggle to stay clean and sober, to empower your sober self. Where it's led me is toward more exposure to the outdoors. As I said, the early domains are your body, your exposure, your activities, your lifestyle, and people. And what's helped me a great deal is to get outdoors. So I've become kind of an amateur naturalist, emphasis on amateur. I've become a kind of birder, beginning birder anyway. To say I know most of the birds that hang around in the local park where I go. You can see that in the background of my screen. That's Cesar Chavez Park in Berkeley, California. I know pretty much the birds that come there. And I know most of the mammals. There aren't very many of them. And I know a few of the bugs. And I know some of the plants, although I'm terrible at plant names. Luckily, we have experts here who can walk down a path in the park and say, oh, there's a Melio Canavisius, or some other Latin name. I just made that one up, okay. And just have just supremely wonderful eyes to spotting things in nature. And I'm gradually learning that because I find that getting out in nature for me is a good solution because I get fresh air and my aging eyes get exposed to a lot of greenery and long distance scenes as well as close up on birds and bugs and plants, and all of that is pretty healthy. And I get exercise by walking around dragging a heavy camera and tripod, and good air. Things are beautiful or can be beautiful. So it's like, what can I say? It's uplifting, even in this very depressing world scene. I won't get into it, but in the nature part of it, even in the middle of all the horrible things that are happening in nature, being out in nature is uplifting and a source of wonder and delight. And well, it's a privilege to have wonder and delight in one's life, particularly in the later years here. So that's a kind of a drift that is working for me. I'm not saying that works for everybody, but what I'm illustrating is that when you start looking at the little branches of the fractal structure of recovery, you can put together a pattern, a new broccoli or a new cauliflower, if you like, uh, to reshape your life. I'm not the same person I was when I was drinking. Oh yeah, inside of me, there's still the same kid is in there, but the outside person is very different. I got to say that of the 31 years and change that I've been clean and sober, I owe about 30 of those years to the fact of being clean and sober. The way I was going at the end, I was heading for the exit. I was even contemplating harming myself. And I knew that, I mean, harming myself more actively and aggressively than I was doing by drinking all the time, which is certainly harming oneself on a regular basis. But I was talking about more radical and more sudden harming oneself. And that would have happened if I had not got clean and sober. So I owe recovery my life. And the key support to allowing me to do that was the social context of the LifeRing meetings. I've been to probably thousands of LifeRing meetings. I never added it up, but it's certainly in the thousands. And for me, growing up as an only child, my parents, we moved around a lot. So that I think by the age of 21, I had lived in 14 different cities. And so I was not a person that, and probably still aren't, a person that forms lasting friendships, that go on, that you remember who you went to grade school with and you still see them and all that. I'm totally envious of people who can point to relationships like that. No way with me. But because I was a lone wolf and still am to some extent, the framework of the LifeRing meetings was just absolutely life-changing for me. I was reluctant to go. I got to credit my treatment counselor at Kaiser in Oakland with forcing me to go. He said, it's a condition of the program, you got to go to some meetings, and gave me the choice of 12-step meetings or what became LifeRing meetings at that time back in 92. And, I asked, so what are the 12-step meetings about? And well, you got there's a higher power and there are steps. And do you believe in powers greater than yourself? I said, oh, yeah. I mean, the U.S. Army, General Motors, U.S. government, they all have much more power than I do. I believe in them. Oh, no, that's not what I meant. I mean, he said, that's not what I meant. I mean, like in, do you believe in God? I said, well, I used to as a kid, but it kind of fell away. And now I'm just really not a religious person. So he said, well, you might try these other ones then. So I went to the other meetings. And even though it was a little scary at first, I remember my first meeting, the first person spoke said, hi, I am whatever, John, I'm an alcoholic. I wanted to run. So it was a very strange first meeting that I came to in LifeRing. But I didn't feel mortally threatened, and I felt that there were good people, weird, but good people. And yeah, I always liked weird, so it was okay. And I stuck with it and just learned heaps and heaps and heaps and heaps about addiction and life and myself, and just got tremendous, tremendous support, and would not be here today talking to you if it hadn't been for those meetings. They were literally my survival kit, my lifeboat in a stormy sea. I like the LifeRing metaphor. I was drowning and the LifeRing saved me. Corny as hell, but there's truth to it. Um, Sometimes uh, making sobriety a priority was not easy. There's a price to pay. At the time I got clean and sober, I was in a long-term relationship, a marriage, uh, with a codependent, a woman who had grown up in an alcoholic family with a seriously alcoholic father. And married an alcoholic, knew he was an alcoholic before he knew he was an alcoholic. And when I got clean and sober, at first, the relationship was very supportive. Oh, yeah, congratulations on staying clean and sober 3 weeks. But as it wore on, it turned. First, it was complaints about, why are you going to all these stupid meetings? You're spending so much time on these meetings, and now you're getting involved in the organization. Why do you have to bother with that? And so I was getting friction for going to meetings. And then I was getting suggestions to drink, and then pretty soon I was getting offered alcohol in the house. And it was just became intolerable. I had to choose between maintaining this relationship or maintaining my sobriety. That was not easy. That was not easy. And I wasn't alone in this. I read some statistic at the time. I don't know what it is today, but that's something like 80% of marriages where one person is a alcoholic and the other one's a codependent, 80% of such marriages break up when the alcoholic gets sober. And well, we were part of that 80%. And it was heavy, and it's still heavy today because, we had 2 kids, and the kids had to live with broken up parents, and all the consequences that flow from that lifelong. So there was a price to pay. But as a result, well, I met another person, and I had learned a few things. When we sat down for coffee and that kind of talk that people have when they're exploring the possibility of maybe getting into a relationship, one of my first questions was, and do you drink? And then my follow-up question, the answer was no. And then my follow-up question was, and do your family drink? And the answer was, my dad has a couple of beers in August when it gets really hot. And that's it. I said, has any of your family ever been in treatment or support groups for alcoholism or addiction? No, nobody ever. I said, well, let's talk. And well, that relationship has lasted 20 years. We are very much together today. And it is given me a new and much happier, much less stressful life, which I owe to being sober and to having learned the lesson to make sobriety a priority, and to, in every decision that I make, like decisions about relationships, to check whether that relationship is going to help to keep me sober or whether it's going to drive me back toward relapse. That's a lesson that I still remember today. I gotta say that inside my head, the issue of empowering your sober self is not a parliamentary democracy. It's not like electing a president and then having an opposing party and maybe electing a different president 4 years later and switching back and forth. No, that's not what empowering your sober self means in my head anyway. My inner addict, who is still there, from time to time I hear its little peaking or whining. My inner addict does not get a voice or a vote, does not have a newspaper or a radio station or a network or a Facebook page or any other means of free expression in my head. Of course, outside it's a whole different story, but in the government of my head, the inner addict is basically locked up, and I intend to keep it that way. In my inner life, sobriety is a dictatorship. Sorry if that scares you, but I mean it. Empowering your sober self, keeping sobriety in power is not the same as a parliamentary democracy where every side gets a vote. No. Been there, done that. I lived under the regime of drinking and drugging for 30 odd years of my life. I ain't going back there. We experimented with that. We tried that to the fullest, and it's over. This is a new regime, if you like. And so that doesn't necessarily, that doesn't color my relationship to politics outside my head. I'm just talking about what it's like inside my head. I mean, maybe my head is weird. I know my head is weird, but maybe my head is different from your head. Maybe in your head, you don't have different voices talking it. Maybe, that's not an issue. But in my head, oftentimes, there's a dialogue, a trialogue, a shouting match. And so I make sure that when it comes to questions of life choices, all the way from the big stem of the cauliflower, all the way down to the tiniest little bits, that the sober self remains empowered lifelong. Well, I think that's pretty much all I had. That's pretty much all I had thought ahead of time to say. So let me sit back and get into Q&A or dialogue or whatever it is that happens next.
Marty, thank you so much. And I'm just getting to know you a little bit. Has been just such an honor for me, and I think for the whole crew here. Before you got here, we had this question about how do we support people who have been in long-term recovery, because then we starting to see some of our friends and people in our meetings who are stopping coming because they just have either lapsed or what have you. You know, as someone who's 5 years in, this is a very scary thing for me, because I'm like, I'm all that, oh, I've made it 5 years, I can do this. And I know you can't get comfortable or fall asleep on that addictive self that you so cleverly keep caged away. But do you have any advice for us as conveners and people who are supporting others in recovery for ways to approach people who have been embracing recovery for a long time and simply just here it is again, you know, the addictive voice is getting louder? What would be your suggestion on that?
Yeah, I'm not a doctor or a therapist. Advice is cheap. Uh, One thing that helped me was to stay engaged with the organization. I was CEO for what, 14 years or so before I burned out, more or less. But there are other ways to stay engaged. Meetings never meetings never become totally boring. There's always, I mean, our meetings aren't formulaic meetings where, you know, you have the same 12 ideas, which really are only about 4 or 5 ideas, but anyhow, and that you repeat those like a Buddhist prayer drum. Um, no, our meetings are full of actualities. I mean, they're like newsreels of what's going on in the real world with people. The troubles that people are facing, the relationship issues, the work issues, the money issues, all the stuff that happens in life. It's all fresh and new, even though it's also horribly familiar.
Yeah.
Uh, it is fresh and new to the people involved in it, and there there isn't at 5 years or so. It's perfectly sensible to stay engaged, to stay involved with the meetings. And any time that a person feels like the inner addictive voice is gaining strength, it's time to go to a meeting. And particularly now, I mean, since the pandemic thing, going to a meeting doesn't mean figuring out a car or public transportation or that you'll just have to fire up your screen and go into Zoom. It's so much easier now. Um, I have some other thoughts about that. I mean, I think person-to-person, face-to-face meetings are more effective than Zoom meetings. My personal old-timers, old-fashioned, um, pre-boomer opinion, okay? But be that as it may, getting to a meeting, Zoomish is very easy, and it can be very supportive. And I know people who have decades, the people who live in remote places who have decades of sobriety, never attended a face-to-face meeting, did the entire thing on uh, LSR mail, uh, and or you know, on online meetings. So it's totally workable. It's totally there. Um, I I struggled to come up with some novel solution for people having problems with long-term recovery. To come up with some solution other than to get connected with other people in recovery. Um, there isn't a there isn't a magic thing other than, you know, the Carnegie Hall solution: practice, practice, practice. Don't drink, don't drink, don't drink. Um, that's the best I can do, Sue.
No, I greatly appreciate that. And I don't know. I think you'd be happy with some of the novel approaches we're starting to take in recovery. I don't know if you've noticed, Marty, because I know you've got your nose, but you've got your eyes on the birds and not on LifeRing these days. But we're moving into a lot of how was your week is still prominent and still is our main drive, but we're starting to do focus groups now, which are like I run one that's called the liver spot. It's for people in recovery who also have medically related SUD related medical conditions, and that's starting to build community, which I think is part of a new generation and a way of looking at recovery. But I also, I don't know if you've been seeing in chat the compliments that you're getting for creating this amazing organization. And I just want to say thank you so much for allowing us the freedom, building an organization and the framework that we can be creative in our approaches. So I really greatly appreciate that. And I think that you're getting you'll be proud to hear. I think we're supporting something like I don't know, maybe I'll have better stats for you tomorrow because they just ran a graph for me, but I couldn't make sense of it because, math is not my forte, but something like 2,500 people a week we're supporting in online meetings. And that doesn't include the people who are in person. So I'm just very grateful to have you here. Does anybody else have any questions for Marty? I know we have a lot of thanks and praise, but any questions?
I want to just jump in and say I'm very grateful to you and to the other folks who are here for the terrific work you've been doing with LifeRing. I'm just blown away by how this organization has evolved. It's wonderful. I can't tell you how thrilled I am when I see what LifeRing is up to and what LifeRing people are doing. And when I hear you talk about it and I see my old friends who are sticking with it and keeping it going, uh, it just it just couldn't be better. I feel just totally thrilled to have been a part of this at its beginning to help it launch into the world. It's like I feel like a proud dad whose kid is not only graduated, but it's like on their way to winning the Nobel Prize or something, like that. I feel really great about it.
Well, thank you, Marty. And thank you so much for being here and sharing your time and your amazing energy. And also all of the tools that you've provided for us so that we can help others. It's amazing. I will be getting that tattoo someday soon. You're amazing and we're so grateful. Thank you, Marty.
My pleasure.